Arrogant sheriff cuffed a single dad eating breakfast, unaware he was FBI. The sheriff slammed the handcuffs around James Whitfield's wrists before the single father could finish his first bite of breakfast. His little son froze beside him, his hand still resting on his arm as every person in the diner turned to watch. James didn't fight back. He didn't shout. He simply looked at his frightened son and whispered that everything would be okay. What nobody in that diner knew was that the quiet man being humiliated in front of his child was not an ordinary father. He was an FBI agent who had spent years putting dangerous criminals behind bars. And that morning he was undercover. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and never judging someone before knowing their story, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment and subscribe to Enlightened Story for more emotional stories. It had been 6 months since James had lost his wife. Since then, every morning had been a battle. He had learned how to pack school lunches, comb his son Lucas's hair badly enough that he sometimes laughed at him, work long hours, and still find the strength to read him a bedtime story. Lucas was 8 years old, but grief had made him quieter than most children his age. James had promised him that no matter how difficult life became, he would always be there. That morning, they stopped at a small roadside diner before Lucas's school. James ordered eggs, toast, and coffee while Lucas happily ate pancakes, unaware that his father had been awake most of the night reviewing a classified case. James was investigating a corruption network involving stolen evidence, illegal weapons, and officials who had been protecting criminals for years. His superiors believed someone inside the county sheriff's department was involved. James had been ordered to remain undercover until he could identify the person responsible. That was why he had come to the diner dressed like an ordinary father instead of an FBI agent. He had no badge around his neck, no weapon on his belt, and no reason to reveal who he really was. Then Sheriff Richard Dunn walked through the diner door. Dunn was known throughout the county as a powerful man who rarely apologized and never tolerated being questioned. He spotted James immediately. Someone had apparently reported seeing a suspicious man matching James's description near an abandoned warehouse the previous night. The sheriff marched toward the table, demanded identification, and accused James of trespassing and interfering with an investigation. James calmly explained that there had been a misunderstanding and asked the sheriff to speak privately. But Dunn had already decided what he wanted everyone to believe. In front of Lucas, the sheriff grabbed James's arm and forced it behind his back. The little boy screamed and begged him to stop. James could have resisted. He could have revealed his badge and ended the humiliation instantly, but he remembered his orders. More importantly, he knew that if the corrupt person inside the department was watching, revealing himself could destroy the entire investigation. So he swallowed his anger and allowed the handcuffs to close around his wrists. Lucas stood beside the table with tears running down his cheeks, asking why they were taking his daddy away. James looked at him and told him that sometimes good people have to stay calm when bad things happen, because the truth has a way of finding its way into the light. Those words broke something inside the sheriff's deputy standing nearby. The deputy had children of his own, and watching a little boy cry while his father was treated like a criminal made him uncomfortable. James was taken outside, but before he reached the patrol car, his phone vibrated. It was a coded message from his FBI team. They had discovered something shocking. The warehouse James had secretly been investigating was connected directly to Sheriff Dunn's closest lieutenant. Suddenly, everything became clear. The sheriff had not simply made a mistake. He had recognized James's undercover identity and was trying to scare him away before the FBI could uncover the truth. But Dunn had made one terrible mistake. He had forgotten that James had already placed a secure recording device inside the diner before breakfast. Every word spoken by the sheriff had been captured. Every accusation, every threat, every mention of the warehouse. And when federal agents arrived minutes later, James's handcuffs became the last thing Sheriff Dunn expected to see, because they were placed on the sheriff himself. The diner fell silent as FBI agents entered. James finally revealed his badge, and the deputy who had watched everything happen lowered his eyes in shame. Dunn's confidence disappeared instantly. The evidence collected during the investigation was enough to expose a network of corruption that had operated for years. Several officials were arrested, and the innocent people who had been falsely accused by the department finally had a chance to tell their stories. But James didn't celebrate. He walked back into the diner and knelt beside Lucas. The boy threw his arms around him so tightly that he nearly lost his balance. James held him close and told him that he had kept his promise. He had come back. The waitress, who had watched the entire scene, quietly brought Lucas another stack of pancakes. She refused to charge James for breakfast that morning. Then the deputy approached James and apologized, not only for what had happened, but for every time he had remained silent while people were treated unfairly. James simply told him that admitting a mistake was the first step toward becoming better. Weeks later, James returned to the same diner with Lucas. The sheriff was gone. The corruption had been exposed, and the community was beginning to heal. On the wall near their table, someone had placed a small handwritten sign that read, "Never judge a person by the moment you see them in." James smiled when he read it, because sometimes the person being humiliated is secretly fighting for everyone else. Sometimes the quietest person in the room carries the greatest responsibility. And sometimes kindness begins with something as simple as believing someone deserves to be heard. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to Enlightened Story. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need a little hope today. Before we end, comment "Kindness always wins" if you believe everyone deserves dignity, compassion, and a second chance. Because James's greatest victory was never exposing the sheriff. It was teaching his son that even when the world treats you unfairly, you should never allow someone else's cruelty to take away your kindness.